mail-order bride rejected for infertility, but 3 frontier children chose her as their mother. Amelia had always dreamed of a new life out west. The idea of a fresh start, away from the crowded, bustling cities of the East, felt like a promise of freedom. She had heard so many stories from women like her, women who had found love and a new home through mail-order marriages. For Amelia, the prospect of being part of a family in a place where she could build something of her own felt like a dream come true. Her parents, eager to see her settled, had always told her that she was too old to be waiting for love to come naturally. When the opportunity arose, Amelia didn't hesitate. She answered the ad for a mail-order bride, a man in the frontier town who was looking for a wife to share his life with. It all seemed perfect. The idea of living in a peaceful, remote place was exactly what she needed to leave behind the disappointments and loneliness of her past. The man's letters had been kind, offering promises of a beautiful life together. When she arrived at the small frontier town, the dust of the road still clinging to her clothes, she was filled with excitement. She had imagined this moment for so long, meeting her future husband, starting a new life. She thought about what her new home might look like. Wide open spaces, a warm hearth, perhaps children running around. Her heart beat faster with every step, full of hope. But when she saw him, all those hopes seemed to crumble. Elias, the man she had written to, didn't look like the man she had expected. The letters had painted him as gentle, kind, and eager to begin a family with her. But the man standing before her, with his stern face and unshaven jaw, was the exact opposite. He hardly smiled when he met her eyes. There was no warmth in his handshake, no welcoming embrace, just a cold, distant expression. Amelia tried not to let her disappointment show. She had traveled so far, leaving everything behind, and she was determined not to let this moment ruin her. Maybe he was just nervous, she thought. They had never actually met in person, after all. There was still a chance they could make things work. But as they talked, it became clear that there was no warmth or kindness in him at all.
"I expected a woman who could give me children," Elias said bluntly, after only a few moments of small talk.
The words cut through the air like a cold wind. Amelia blinked, unsure if she had heard him right. She knew that he had wanted a family, but she hadn't expected him to be so forward about it, and when she hesitated trying to explain her condition, his face hardened. He didn't let her finish. "I've already made my decision," Elias continued, his tone sharp and final. "If you can't bear children, then you have no place here. I don't need a wife who can't provide me with what I want." He turned away from her, as though he were done with the conversation. Amelia stood there, her heart sinking. She had known there was a chance this wouldn't work, but to hear it spoken so coldly felt like a sharp slap in the face. She felt as if the ground beneath her had suddenly disappeared, leaving her floating in the air, unsure of where to go next. She had imagined that he might have been disappointed, but she had never imagined this level of rejection. Her mind raced. She wanted to shout at him, to tell him he was wrong, that she was worth more than just her ability to bear children. But she stayed silent. What could she say? She had nothing to defend herself with. She couldn't change the truth. The letters had never mentioned his need for children so urgently. She had believed that perhaps they could still have a life together. One of companionship, of shared goals. But the reality of his rejection stung. He didn't want her, not for who she was, but for what she couldn't do. She turned to leave, her feet heavy as they carried her back down the road. As she walked, her eyes stung with unshed tears. She had never felt so humiliated, so utterly unwanted. The man who was supposed to be her future had shut the door in her face, and now she was left with nothing. The next few days were a blur. Elias had made it clear that she was no longer welcome at his ranch. The townspeople, though kind, had little to offer her. They offered polite sympathy, but no one could really understand the pain she felt. Her dreams had been shattered, and she had nowhere to go. She couldn't return to the East. That would feel like admitting failure. And the thought of being a burden on anyone made her stomach turn. She spent her days walking through the town, her feet carrying her without purpose. She went to the local store, bought a few supplies, and tried to keep herself busy, but everything felt wrong. She had come here to build a life, to be part of something, but now she was alone, cast aside by the very man who was supposed to be her partner. One afternoon, as she was walking to the store, a voice broke through her thoughts. "Are you all right?" It was a young boy, no older than 10, standing on the side of the road with his hands in his pockets. His clothes were dusty, and his face was thin, as though he had known hardship for much longer than his years suggested. Amelia looked down at him, surprised. "I'm fine," she said, trying to put on a brave face. The boy didn't seem convinced. "You don't look fine," he said matter-of-factly, his brown eyes studying her face. Amelia smiled weakly. "I'm just tired. It's been a long journey." "Where are you from?" the boy asked, his voice softening. "From the east," she replied, still unsure of how to respond. She wasn't sure if it was too soon to talk about what had happened with Elias. She wasn't sure she wanted anyone to know. But the boy seemed different somehow. He didn't judge her. He didn't ask about her marriage or why she had come to the frontier. He just looked at her, as though he understood. He tilted his head. "The store is just up the road. You need help?" Amelia hesitated. She wasn't used to asking for help, but in this strange new town, she had no other choice. "Yes, I think I could use some," she admitted. The boy offered a small, crooked smile. "I'm Billy," he said, holding out a hand. She shook it gently, and they walked toward the store together in comfortable silence. Amelia couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace when she was around him. There was something in his eyes, a quiet strength, a resilience that she admired. It reminded her of her own strength, the strength that she had almost forgotten in the face of rejection. As they walked, the sound of children's laughter filled the air. Amelia turned to see a group of 3 children playing in the distance, running along the dusty road. The sight struck her. They looked like they belonged to this place, like they had always been here, at home in the wide open spaces. For a moment, Amelia felt as though she too could belong. Maybe not in the way she had imagined, but still in some way. Billy glanced up at her, as if reading her thoughts. "They're my sisters," he said, gesturing to the children. "Sarah and Susan. We live in the big house on the hill." Amelia smiled. "They look like a lot of fun." Billy shrugged. "They are, most of the time." He glanced at her again, his young face filled with curiosity. "Are you going to stay in town?" Amelia didn't answer right away. She had no idea what her future held, but she realized in that moment that she had to keep moving forward. The world had changed for her, but it wasn't over. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Even if it wasn't the life she had imagined. She had come out west seeking love and a family. Now she wasn't sure what she was looking for. But as she watched Billy and his sisters, something inside her stirred. Maybe, just maybe, she could still find a home here, one she hadn't expected. The days that followed Elias's rejection felt like a blur to Amelia. The bright, wide-open spaces of the frontier that had once seemed full of promise now seemed vast and empty. She wandered the town feeling more like a stranger every day. But as time went on, she found herself settling into a rhythm. The routine of daily life began to ease the sharp pain in her heart, even though the hurt never fully left. Amelia spent her mornings at the local store, helping Mrs. Bicefa retired girls, Williams, the storekeeper, with small tasks. Mrs. Pierce. Williams was a kind woman, always welcoming and warm, and she did her best to make Amelia feel at home. The older woman would often smile at Amelia with understanding eyes, as if sensing the sorrow behind her quiet exterior. But Amelia didn't speak about Elias or the harsh words that had sent her away. She wasn't sure how to explain it, even to herself. Instead, she focused on the children, Billy, Susan, and little Sarah. They came by the store almost every day. At first, they had only come for small errands or for something to eat, their eyes watchful and uncertain. But gradually, Amelia noticed that they were looking to her for more than just help with chores. They seemed to find comfort in her presence, something they had not found with other adults in the town. Billy, the oldest, was quiet but not shy. He had a quiet strength about him, an air of responsibility that reminded Amelia of herself in some ways. He was always looking after his sisters, making sure they were safe and fed. Susan, the middle child, was bold and quick-witted, always ready with a question or a playful jab at Billy. Little Sarah was the youngest, a sweet, innocent girl who still believed in the magic of the world. Amelia found herself watching them, her heart softening with each passing day. At first, the children's visits were simple exchanges. Billy would ask for flour or sugar, and the girls would look on, shy but curious. Amelia found herself smiling at their innocence, at the way they clung together like a small band of survivors. She could see that they had been through a lot, more than children their age should have to bear, but there was a resilience in them that spoke volumes. Amelia began to wonder if they too felt like outsiders in this strange, lonely town. One afternoon, as she was finishing up some chores, Billy came by with a request. "Mrs. Williams said you're the best cook in town," he said, looking up at her with those serious eyes. "We're out of bread. Can you make some for us?" Amelia was surprised by the request, but a part of her felt glad to do something useful, something that could bring a little comfort to the children. She smiled and nodded. "Of course, Billy. I'll get started right away." Billy's face lit up, and he ran off to tell his sisters. The bread was simple, just flour, water, and salt. But as the dough rose and filled the small kitchen with a warm, comforting scent of fresh baking, Amelia felt a sense of peace that had been missing from her life for so long. When the bread was done, she wrapped it carefully and took it to the children's home on the hill. Billy answered the door, his face lighting up when he saw the loaf. "Thank you, Mrs. Armstrong," he said, using her last name for the first time, a sign that he was beginning to accept her. "The girls are going to love this."
Amelia smiled softly. "You're welcome, Billy."
"Take care of it." As she turned to leave, she saw the other children peeking around the corner of the house, their eyes wide with curiosity. Susan grinned at her. "I told Billy you could bake better than anyone," she said. "Maybe you could come over and teach us." Amelia hesitated, but then she saw the sincerity in Susan's eyes. She could see that the girl, despite her playful teasing, had a need for something more, something that had been missing from her life for a long time. "I'd be happy to teach you," Amelia said, her heart warmed by the offer. "We can bake together. Maybe next time we can make something special." The girls' faces lit up at the idea, and for the first time since arriving in this strange town, Amelia felt like she had a purpose. It wasn't the life she had imagined, and it wasn't the family she had hoped for, but in that moment, it felt like the beginning of something meaningful. The days that followed were filled with small, quiet moments of connection. Amelia would visit the children whenever they needed something, a fresh loaf of bread, some help with their chores, or simply someone to talk to. In return, they shared their stories with her. Billy told her about their mother, how she had been a kind, gentle woman who had always taken care of them, but who had passed away unexpectedly. Susan told her about the time they had spent in town before their mother died, about how they had struggled to survive on their own. Little Sarah, in her own way, clung to Amelia as though she had found a new mother. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. Amelia began to see herself in the children, their resilience and strength reminding her of her own. She had thought that she was too broken to care for anyone, that the pain of rejection had shattered her dreams forever. But in the company of these three children, she found a new sense of purpose. She didn't need to be a mother in the traditional sense. She could still be someone who cared, someone who gave of herself in small, quiet ways. It was during one of their afternoon visits that something changed. Amelia had just finished helping Susan and Sarah with their chores, and they were sitting on the porch, enjoying the warmth of the sun as they ate the bread Amelia had made. Billy sat a little apart from them, his eyes focused on the horizon. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "you're different from the other women we've met." "How so?" "You don't make us feel like we're a burden," Billy said quietly. "You don't treat us like we're just kids to be looked after. You listen to us. You help us." Amelia's heart swelled at his words. "I'm glad you feel that way, Billy," she said softly. "I want to be here for you, all of you." The three children exchanged looks, and then Susan, always the brave one, spoke up. "We don't want you to go, Mrs. Monty Armstrong. We want you to stay." You're the only one who really cares about us." The words struck Amelia like a thunderclap. She had never expected anything like this. It wasn't the life she had dreamed of, but in that moment she realized that it was more than enough. She had a family now in a way she had never imagined. The children had chosen her not because of what she could give them, but because of who she was, someone who cared, someone who wanted to help them heal. Amelia smiled through the lump in her throat. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. "I'll always be here." From that moment on, everything changed. The children came to her more often, seeking her out for comfort, guidance, and simply companionship. Amelia had found something that no rejection could take away. She had found a family, not the one she had dreamed of, but one that was real, one that was hers. The pain of rejection from Elias faded, replaced by something far more important, the bond she had with the children and the new life they were building together. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. Amelia was no longer just a stranger in a strange town. She was someone who belonged, and for the first time in a long while she felt truly at home. As the weeks passed, Amelia's life in the frontier town slowly began to take on a new shape. Though the sharp pain of rejection still lingered, it became less of a burden as time wore on. With each passing day, the bond she had formed with Billy, Susan, and Sarah grew stronger. She found herself waking up with a sense of purpose, something that had been absent when she first arrived. The children needed her, and she needed them in a way she hadn't fully understood until now. They had become her anchor, her reason to keep moving forward. Amelia's relationship with the townspeople also began to shift. In the beginning, she had felt like an outsider, someone who didn't quite belong. The small, tight-knit community had made her feel like a stranger, and the coldness of her initial meeting with Elias had only reinforced her sense of isolation. But as the days turned into weeks, the townspeople began to recognize her for more than just the woman rejected by her would-be husband. They saw the way she cared for the children, the kindness she showed to everyone she met, and the quiet strength that she carried with her. Slowly, she began to feel like a part of something, a small but important piece of the community. One of the people who had been particularly welcoming was Mrs. Williams, the elderly storekeeper. Amelia spent many mornings working with her in the shop, organizing goods, chatting with the occasional customer, and learning the ins and outs of life in the town. Mrs. Williams had a sharp wit and a kind heart, and she quickly became someone Amelia could confide in. One afternoon, as they were sorting through the shipment of supplies, Mrs. Williams sat down beside Amelia, her eyes soft with concern. "You know, dear," she said, her voice gentle but knowing, "I've been watching you with those children. I've never seen a woman care for anyone the way you do." Amelia shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. "They've been through a lot," she said quietly. "I'm just trying to help in whatever way I can." Mrs. Williams nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "You're doing more than helping, my dear. You're giving them something they've needed for a long time. You're giving them love." Amelia's heart swelled at the words, but she quickly turned away, pretending to busy herself with the crates of goods. She hadn't fully allowed herself to acknowledge just how much the children had come to mean to her. She had always been careful with her emotions, afraid of letting herself care too much, afraid of getting hurt. But with each passing day, she found herself caring more than she had ever thought possible. The children had filled a hole in her heart she hadn't known existed. They had given her a sense of belonging, something she had longed for but never found. Billy especially had become like a son to her. He was the protector of his sisters, a quiet, serious boy who carried the weight of responsibility on his small shoulders. He often came to Amelia with questions about life, about what it meant to be a man, about how to care for his sisters in a world that had been so unkind to them. Amelia listened patiently, offering advice when she could, and always making sure that Billy knew he wasn't alone. She saw so much of herself in him, the same sense of responsibility, the same desire to protect those they loved. Susan, on the other hand, had a spirit that could not be contained. She was bold, quick to speak her mind, and full of energy. Her infectious laughter filled the air whenever she was around, and Amelia couldn't help but smile whenever she heard it. Susan had a way of making even the darkest days feel brighter. She often dragged Amelia outside to play with the children, insisting that a little fun was just what they needed. Amelia had never been one for games, but for Susan, she found herself laughing and running with abandon, allowing herself to forget her worries, if only for a little while. And then there was Sarah, the youngest of the three, whose innocent face and wide eyes made Amelia's heart ache with tenderness. Sarah had lost so much already in her short life, yet she still managed to find joy in the little things. She was the first to rush to Amelia for comfort after a hard day, always looking to her for reassurance and love. Amelia often found herself holding Sarah close, feeling the warmth of the little girl's embrace, and realizing that in some ways, Sarah had healed a part of her heart she hadn't even known was broken. As the days turned into months, Amelia's connection with the children deepened, but so did her connection with the town. More and more she became involved in the community. She helped out at the local school, offering to teach the children to read and write. She lent a hand at town events, bringing her baking skills to the local gatherings, where her bread and pies were always in high demand. The more she gave, the more she found herself accepted by the people around her. They saw her for who she was now, not the woman who had been rejected by her husband, but the woman who had chosen to stay and make a life for herself in the harsh, unforgiving land. The change didn't go unnoticed by Elias. He had kept to himself in the weeks following his rejection of Amelia, busying himself with the daily tasks on his ranch. But no matter how hard he tried to focus on his work, his thoughts kept drifting back to her. He saw her around town, helping others, caring for the children, and slowly, a nagging feeling began to grow inside him. At first, he told himself it was just guilt. After all, he had been cruel to her when he rejected her. But as the days went by, the feeling began to grow into something else. He couldn't help but notice the way the townspeople spoke about her. They admired her, respected her. They saw the things he hadn't been able to see, the quiet strength, the care she gave to others, the love she had shown to the children. He began to feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He had told himself that he had done what was best for him, but now, in the silence of his ranch, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had made a terrible mistake. He found himself wondering what it would have been like if he had accepted her. He had been too quick to judge her, too focused on what he thought he needed instead of what he actually wanted. But by then it seemed too late. Amelia had moved on, creating a new life for herself, one that didn't need him. She had found a purpose, a family, and Elias was left with nothing but regret. One afternoon as he was working on his ranch, Elias saw Billy and Susan walking past, their arms wrapped around each other. They were heading toward the store, probably to see Amelia. The sight of them so close, so connected, made something inside Elias twist. He had seen them growing closer to her, had seen the way they looked at her, and he couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. It wasn't just the children he had pushed away. It was everything. He had pushed away the very thing he had been searching for all along, love. That evening Elias found himself walking down the dirt road toward the store, unsure of what he was going to do, but knowing that he couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. He had to make things right, if it wasn't too late. When he reached the store, Amelia was there, talking with Mrs. Williams. As he approached, he saw the warmth in her eyes, the way she smiled at the children who came in and out of the shop, and he realized that this was the woman he had rejected, the woman who had been strong enough to survive the harshest of circumstances and still come out with a heart full of love. "Amelia," he said softly, his voice uncertain. She turned, and for the briefest moment their eyes met. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he continued, his words slow but genuine. "But I need to tell you that I was wrong. I was so focused on what I thought I needed that I didn't see what was right in front of me. You've built something beautiful here, and I can see now that I was a fool to let you go." Amelia looked at him for a long moment, her face unreadable. She had heard the apology, but part of her wondered if it was too late to fix things. But the way he was standing there, vulnerable, without the usual walls he had put up, made her pause. "I don't need your forgiveness, Elias," she said finally, her voice steady. "But I want you to know that I found something here, something I never expected, and I'm not letting it go." Elias nodded, his heart heavy. "I understand," he said quietly. "But I'll be here if you ever need me." As he turned to walk away, Amelia couldn't help but feel a sense of peace settle in her chest. She had found what she needed, and it was more than she had ever imagined. It wasn't about him or anyone else. It was about the family she had created, and that was enough. Amelia had always thought that the hardest part of life would be finding a place to call home. But as the weeks turned into months, she came to realize that the real challenge was figuring out where her heart belonged. At first, when she had arrived in the frontier town, she had been full of hope for a future with Elias, thinking that together they would build something meaningful. But when he rejected her, those dreams came crashing down, and Amelia was left standing in the middle of a place that felt both foreign and yet strangely comforting. The children, Billy, Susan, and Sarah, had been the unexpected gift that helped her rebuild. They had brought her something she had known she was missing: purpose. As the days passed, Amelia found herself becoming a constant figure in their lives. She was there for the simple things, helping with homework, teaching them to bake, offering comfort after a long day. She gave them love, something they had lost when their mother passed. In return, they filled the empty spaces in her heart, teaching her that family didn't always have to come in the traditional form. Billy had always been the serious one, the protector of his sisters, but over time, he began to let his guard down with Amelia. The more he talked to her, the more he revealed the weight of the responsibility he carried. He had always tried to be the adult in the family, even though he was still just a child himself. Amelia listened patiently, offering him guidance and support without judgment. She reminded him that it wasn't his job to carry everything on his own. Together, they could share the burden. Susan was the complete opposite of Billy. Full of energy and curiosity, she was always ready with a joke or a new idea. Susan had an infectious laugh that could make even the hardest days seem a little brighter. Amelia found herself laughing along with Susan more often than she expected. The girl had a way of turning the ordinary into something magical. Whether it was helping Amelia with the laundry or simply sitting down to share a meal, Susan made everything feel like an adventure. Little Sarah, the youngest, was the one who seemed to need the most attention. She clung to Amelia whenever she could, seeking comfort in her embrace. Despite the loss she had already faced at such a young age, Sarah still had a sweetness about her that melted Amelia's heart.
The little girl had a way of making her feel needed in a way she had never experienced before.
Amelia took this role seriously, knowing how important it was for Sarah to feel safe and loved. As the months passed, Amelia began to notice something changing in herself as well. She wasn't just filling the role of caretaker for the children anymore. She was starting to realize that she had become a mother figure for them, whether she had planned for it or not. The children had chosen her, and in doing so they had given her the gift of belonging. One afternoon, as the sun began to set and painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, Amelia sat on the porch of her small house, looking out over the land. She had worked hard to make this place feel like home. The house wasn't much, just a simple cabin with a few worn pieces of furniture, but it was hers, and more importantly, it was a place where the children could feel safe. As she sat there, lost in thought, she heard footsteps behind her. It was Billy, looking hesitant as he approached. He had grown taller since the first time she had met him, and his shoulders seemed broader, as though he were trying to carry the weight of the world even more than before. But today, there was something different in his expression. He wasn't just the protector of his sisters anymore. He was someone who had begun to trust Amelia in a way he hadn't before.
"You've done a lot for us, you know," Billy said quietly, his voice soft.
"I don't know what we would have done without you." Amelia looked up at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. She hadn't expected him to say anything like this. "Billy, you don't have to thank me. I'm just doing what feels right." Billy took a step closer, his gaze meeting hers. "No, it's more than that. You're not just helping us survive. You're helping us live again." His words hit her harder than she expected. She had never thought of it that way, but in that moment she understood exactly what he meant. She wasn't just taking care of them. She was giving them the chance to heal, to rebuild, just as she was rebuilding herself. Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't realized how much she had come to depend on the children for her own sense of purpose. She had given them something they needed, but in return, they had given her something she hadn't known she was missing: a family. Billy's words stuck with her long after he had gone back inside. As she sat on the porch watching the sunset, she realized that this was what she had been searching for all along. It wasn't about the life she had planned for herself, or the future she had imagined with Elias. It was about the family she had found here in this small frontier town, in the children she had come to love as her own. And for the first time since her arrival, Amelia felt at peace with the life she had built.
The next few weeks passed in a blur of simple, everyday moments.
Amelia's days were filled with laughter, chores, and the occasional challenge. There were still hard days when the weight of everything seemed too much to bear, but those moments were becoming fewer and farther between. She had learned to lean on the children when she needed to, and they had learned to lean on her. The town had slowly begun to accept her as one of their own. She had made a place for herself in the community, helping with the school and volunteering at the town events. People began to respect her not because of her past or her failed marriage, but because of the person she had become. She had shown them that she was more than just the woman rejected by Elias. She was someone who could be relied on, someone who would stand by them, no matter the circumstances. It was during one of these town events that Amelia saw Elias again. It had been months since their brief conversation at the store, and though he had apologized, Amelia hadn't seen him in person until now. He was standing across the room, talking with a group of men, but his eyes kept darting toward her. Amelia could feel his gaze on her, but she didn't turn to meet it. Instead, she focused on the children who were playing nearby, and the warm feeling of contentment that filled her chest. Elias eventually made his way over to her, and for a moment, they simply stood there, looking at each other. His face was tired, worn from the burdens he had carried, but there was something else there now. Something that had been missing before. Regret, maybe. Or maybe it was just the understanding that he had made a mistake. "I've been thinking about what you said," Elias began, his voice hesitant. "And I've realized that I was wrong." Amelia nodded, her expression unreadable. She had already heard his apology, and though it had meant something at the time, it didn't hold the same weight anymore. She had moved on, and in many ways she had found something better than she had ever imagined. "I don't need your apology," Amelia said quietly, her voice steady. "What matters now is what I've built here. With the children, I've found a family. And that's enough for me." Elias nodded slowly, his face softening. "I'm glad to see you happy," he said, his voice sincere. "I was wrong to push you away, but I can see now that you're where you need to be." Amelia smiled, though it was bittersweet. "Thank you, Elias, but I'm not the same person I was when I arrived here. I've changed, and I'm finally at peace." Elias seemed to understand, and with one last look he turned and walked away, leaving Amelia standing there surrounded by the people who had come to mean everything to her. As the event went on, Amelia watched the children playing together, laughing and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. She felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the setting sun. It was the warmth of a life built on love, on second chances, and on the family she had found when she least expected it. As the days turned into months, Amelia's life began to feel more grounded. The initial uncertainty that had come with the rejection and the feeling of being out of place in the small frontier town had faded. She had found her rhythm and her role in the community. What had started as a difficult, painful situation had transformed into something entirely new, something beautiful. She had built a life for herself, one that was full of love, purpose, and belonging. Her bond with Billy, Susan, and Sarah had deepened. In them she had found a new family, one she hadn't expected but had grown to cherish. They were no longer just children in need of care. They had become her heart, and in return, she had become their mother figure, someone who gave them love, support, and a sense of stability. They had learned to trust her, and she had learned to love them as her own. There were still moments of sadness, moments when the weight of their shared losses would creep in, but those moments were becoming less frequent. The children had begun to heal. just as she had. Billy, the eldest, had transformed before her eyes. When she first met him, he was burdened with the weight of responsibility, trying to protect his sisters while still carrying the heavy ache of losing their mother. He had been reserved, cautious, always holding back his emotions. But now, with Amelia's encouragement, Billy had started to relax. He no longer felt the need to be the sole protector of his family. He had learned that it was okay to lean on others, and it had made him a more open, more compassionate person. Amelia had watched him grow into a young man, one who would protect his sisters, yes, but also one who understood the importance of love and vulnerability. Susan, with her quick wit and endless energy, had always been the light in their home. She was the one who could always make them laugh, who could find joy in the simplest of things. But underneath her playful exterior, Amelia had seen a depth of emotion. Susan had missed her mother desperately, and while she hid it behind her smile, it had been there, quietly hurting her. Amelia had been there for Susan when she needed her most, offering comfort when the pain was too much to bear. Over time, Susan had begun to open up to Amelia more and more, sharing her fears, her hopes, and even her dreams of one day running a shop just like Mrs. Williams. Amelia had encouraged her, letting her know that no dream was too big. Together, they had started baking in the mornings, making all kinds of treats, and Amelia had promised Susan that they would one day sell their creations at the town market. And then there was Sarah, the youngest, the most fragile of the three, who had wrapped herself tightly around Amelia's heart. Sarah had come to her with a need for comfort and love that Amelia had been ready to give. She had found solace in Amelia's embrace, and Amelia had poured all her nurturing care into her. Watching Sarah laugh, seeing her innocence return, brought tears to Amelia's eyes. It wasn't just about taking care of a child. It was about watching a soul heal. Sarah had started to bloom, to find joy again in the simple moments, splashing in puddles, picking flowers, running down the dirt roads. Amelia had given her the love she needed, and in return Sarah had reminded Amelia of the power of healing, the way a broken heart could mend with time and care. The small house that Amelia had settled in felt more like a home every day. The walls, though modest, had become a place filled with laughter and love. There was warmth in the kitchen, the smell of freshly baked bread wafting through the air. And there were always people coming and going, townsfolk stopping by to say hello, children playing in the yard, and neighbors offering their help when needed. Amelia had become part of the fabric of the town, woven into its daily life. It wasn't always easy. There were challenges, moments when life seemed too heavy, when the weight of everything would press down on her chest. But those moments were far outnumbered by the small joys that filled her days. She had found her place here. She was no longer the lonely woman who had arrived, heartbroken and unsure of her future. She was now a beloved member of the community, a woman who had helped to heal a family and a town. The town itself had changed too. The people who had once looked at Amelia with a mix of pity and curiosity now saw her for what she truly was. Someone who had taken what life had given her and made something beautiful from it. They admired her strength and resilience, and many came to her for advice, for comfort, or simply for a kind word. Amelia had found a place to belong, and in doing so she had created something that went beyond just surviving. She had created a life worth living. The biggest change, however, had come in the form of Elias. It had been a few months since their brief conversation at the store, and though Amelia had gone on with her life, Elias had not been able to shake the feeling that something was missing. He had apologized to her, but the truth was, it wasn't just about saying the words. He had regretted his decision to reject her from the start, but it was only now, seeing how her life had flourished, that he fully understood the magnitude of his mistake. He had taken her for granted, thinking that his need for a wife who could give him children was more important than the woman herself. He had been wrong. He had been blind to her strength, her heart, and her ability to build something beautiful from nothing. And now, it seemed, it was too late. Elias spent his days working on his ranch, but his mind was constantly on Amelia. He watched her from a distance, seeing the way she interacted with the children, how she was beloved by the people of the town. It made him feel small, insignificant. He had been so certain that he was doing the right thing, But now, looking at her, he realized that he had been wrong all along. One afternoon, after working on his ranch, Elias found himself walking toward the small house that Amelia had made into a home. He had been thinking about this moment for weeks, wondering what he would say, how he would explain himself. But the truth was, he didn't know if words would be enough. He just knew that he had to try. When he arrived at the house, he saw the children playing outside, their laughter echoing in the air. He hesitated for a moment, watching them, before he made his way up to the porch. Amelia was sitting there, knitting a small sweater for Sarah. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment, their eyes met. "Amelia," Elias said quietly, his voice unsure. "I've been thinking about what I said." "About what I did."
Amelia didn't say anything right away. She had heard his apology before, but there was something different in the way he spoke this time.
It wasn't just regret, it was understanding. It was as though he had finally seen her for who she really was, not just as a woman who couldn't have children, but as someone capable of creating a life full of love and warmth. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," Elias continued, his voice thick with emotion, "but I want you to know that I've come to understand just how wronged I was. You've built something here, something I could never have imagined. And I don't know what I was thinking when I let you go." Amelia looked at him, her heart heavy. She had moved on, had built a life she was proud of, but hearing his words stirred something inside her. She had never stopped caring for him, but the life she had now, this life with the children, the love she had found, was the life she had chosen. "You were wrong, Elias," she said softly, her voice steady but kind. "But I've learned that sometimes we have to make the mistakes to learn who we really are. I found my family here. Not the one I thought I would have, but the one I needed." Elias nodded, his face filled with a mix of regret and understanding. "I'm glad you found that," he said quietly. "I hope you know I'll always be here for you if you need me." Amelia smiled faintly. "Thank you, Elias. But I'm where I need to be." And with that, they both knew that their paths had diverged. Elias had come to terms with his mistake, and Amelia had found the life she had always longed for. It was a different life than she had imagined, but it was hers, full of love, purpose, and the family she had chosen.